I may end up being a little sketchy, but again, as I was sharing, that Usha ji is a very distinguished leader, and she was with various groups in the southern leg of the country. Last, I believe she was with the Meridian group of schools, which was more of a very active role. She was involved in that. However, now she is, in fact, looking after or being advisor to the Basilwoods schools group of schools by ISKCON and advisor education initiatives to EMRI Green Health Initiatives in India. Those are the current role which she is performing. And as I was mentioning to all of you, that how we will do this as a format is that we will first hear from our guest, Dr. Usha Reddy, on these top 10 priorities, which either she has put it down for herself or she would recommend to leaders like yourself. We will first run through those priorities and why are those priorities. That's the way she will possibly help us understand. And then we will, for the majority of our conversation, we'll open up this room for Q&A, which is you can ask your question to Dr. Usha Reddy. My only request is that we often get carried away by trying to ask everything under the sun. I think we'll have to keep that in mind, and please keep your questions very, very focused to what the discussion point is, which is either to do with the top 10 priorities for the schools is what our core discussion point is. So I would request that we keep our questioning around that theme. Okay, so if that is okay, I have for now muted all of you. Okay, just purely for the intent that we can run this first half very smoothly. There is no disturbance as such. While you are putting some chats or pleasantries, I will generally avoid them as well. That's just disturbing. That really doesn't help anybody. Good evening, everybody. We have said it for once and all for everybody. And on behalf of everyone, I have said this, good evening to all. Okay. And what we will do is that when we will open up the Q&A section, you have to put up a virtual show of hand. The moment you will do so, I will help you unmute, which is you yourself, and then you can ask the question. Okay. On that note, as I mentioned, good evening and welcome everybody. I'm doing this after a long time. And if I do any mistake, I'm sure you will be magnanimous enough to ignore those mistakes. Okay. Over to you, Dr. Usha Reddy, ma'am, for your initial half of the deliberation. All yours.
Thank you so much, Gaurav, and it's a pleasure to be with the co-educators who are present here this evening. And like I said, we learn from each other. And for me, it's always exciting to present, my thoughts on, what can be done in the education sector. So I do believe that all of us as leaders, we ought to sometimes step back from what we're doing because we get caught in our administrative roles and look at the larger picture of ourselves as leaders who are influencers. So we need to take a step back and first of all, assess what we're doing and start rethinking about what is this limitless horizon that can lie in front of us, and are we utilizing it adequately? When we open up the vistas with no boundaries of what can be done, the possibilities and the probabilities of what will actually impact quality education, I think then we will move away from the mundane to something that is more visionary in nature. And why I do believe that we ought to do this exercise once in a while is because the world is moving at a very, very fast pace. And we understand that we're trying to keep abreast with all the changes that are happening as best as we can, in spite of wearing all the multiple hats that we do as heads of organization. So I do believe that, first of all, understanding what is it that we're doing and what we ought to do, and what are the steps that we need to take, to kind of see that there is some kind of an actionable change happening within our schools. So when I say schools, I mean it's a microcosm of society. Anything that is happening in the world, I think that must be given in minute lessons to all of us who are working there. I mean the faculty, parents, and students. So I'd like to begin with, what exactly happens, why or what is the purpose of schools, in fact? Schools are there to impart education and to give life skills to children so that they stand on their own feet and make something of their own lives. Somewhere in this whole thing of, unfortunately, the scenario is that I think we, especially in February, I'm sure all the educators are somewhere heads down with the examinations and, the results that will come out soon, and the pressure builds on. It's important for us as leaders to understand that all learning that happens in our educational institutions is so that it opens up the vistas and minds of the children to explore, experiment, not be afraid to fail, and move on in life in a very creative, adaptive manner. To be individuals who can think and make changes in the world, to be team players who can collaborate and lead the team to collective success, never to worry about what the future holds.
I think there's some technical thing, right? Is anybody else able to hear Dr. Jyoti? I don't think so.
No, sir.
Right, correct. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Perfect. Never mind. I think there's some technical problem at Usha ji's end, in fact. So I believe she will get it rectified. In the meantime, if you all can come on the video, how have you been? I have not met many of you for a while now, in fact. So I can see Pankaj ji is here. Wonderful. Good to see you. How are you? अब आपको unmute कर सकते हैं आप.
Hello, very good evening, Mr. Gaurav.
How are
Very
you?
nice to see you.
Lovely to see you. Wonderful.
After a long gap, I'm going to see you now.
Yes, it's been a while, Pankaj ji. How are you? Wonderful. And Sangeeta ji is also here. Sangeeta ji from TMS Indore. How are you? Jyoti ji is here. I'll just
think there was a slight glitch.
There was some.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am is back. Gaurav, I'm good. And it's nice. I think we can continue with ma'am again.
No,
Yeah.
We were trying to have a filler.
Yes.
Thank you. I think something went wrong in between.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Please
Yeah.
continue.
So, to continue, the very word means leisure. But, where are we actually creating that leisure for children? And what we understand as what schools ought to do is totally, totally different from what actually has to happen in a school. Where is their time? When they're not cracked by this fixed timetable, where they can actually think, do things creative, and explore their talents. So, the first point that comes to my mind is keep a small time, a little bit of time in a week, fortnight, if it may be, where it is just leisure time for a child to explore and, kind of think of doing things differently. I'm not saying it's something that doesn't happen in all schools. I come from a school where this was actually done quite often. I studied in a school called Rishi Valley by this very famous philosopher, Jiddu Krishnamurti. So we had ample time where we did nothing. And he believed that everything begins with nothing. So, to understand the deeper sense of a child, their emotional, social well-being, to help them get mindful about a lot of things, I think let's not cram it only with what we have to do to cover the syllabus, but aim at discovering not just the syllabus, but also themselves. Okay, so I would like to first start with, what I have actually demarcated what I'm going to talk about into 5 sectors. So one is what happens in the classrooms and, the very purpose of education, goal setting, and things like that. I'm also moving on to a very valid thing which all of us are facing is technological advancements. So, how much of technology do we imbibe? What do we do with it? And, how much is too much? Okay, that is one aspect. The third aspect, which is very, very important, is going to be the social and emotional quotient of the child. So what can we do to ensure that children are safe, secure, and also have the liberty to experiment and learn without fear of failure by building on their confidence by some kind of hand-holding activities. The next sector is going to be, mindfulness, your health, life skills, and so on and so forth, which is another segment I'd like to touch upon. And the last segment, that I would like to talk about is contribution to community and, having environmental values, because these sustainable values are a must for every human being on this planet. So briefly, instead of 10, I'm sure that there will be some points that would come under each of these 5 areas that I'm discussing. So I'd like to begin first with the leader, saying, can we just step back, realign ourselves and say, what is the purpose of my own, thinking process here? What is my ikigai, if I may put it that way? So, what is the purpose of my life? Not just as a professional. And I think we all get carried away by the labeling that we have of heads of organizations, whether it's a CEO, principal, headmistress, whatever. But that's not all. We're also people, and we value ourselves for a lot of other things that we are capable of. So understanding the very purpose and goal of your life and linking it with your profession will, I think, kind of have a lot more meaning when we talk to our teams. Help them also do the similar goal setting, and it trickles down to the student and has an impact on the parents as well. So therefore, the head of organization becomes that solid influencer and role model. I salute all of you because I respect that each of you are doing a fantastic job in your own organizations. But I would like to get into the classroom scenario and see what is the actual transition that's happening. And I will not touch upon technology as much here, but just the pedagogy. And do we actually call it pedagogy, what's transacting, or is andragogy? And how do we actually distinguish between these two terms? So when I say that it's a classroom environment, dynamics itself changes because of the pedagogy in a classroom or the andragogy, it depends on the head of organization to make that distinction. So what happens in a classroom that is, following a methodology of andragogy is going to be that it is very authoritarian in, execution, and it's very formal. It doesn't engage the children, as much. It's a very competitive kind of a classroom scenario, and it's also often very judgmental. It's regimented, it's judgmental, it's fixed. There's a lot of discipline in the class, and it goes on more as a one-way traffic. But the task gets done if you think the task is to complete whatever curriculum there is. But by and large, what we're aiming at is to enhance the pedagogy in our schools and to make it a wonderful dynamic situation in the class where it's a relaxed atmosphere, where the child becomes a partner in the learning process, where the teacher, who is a facilitator, engages by asking inquiring questions. And I think that's a wonderful workshop that all of us must undertake. Say, how or what is the art of asking the right questions in the class? And that's all you need to do. Everything else comes up from the answers from the children. And then you just kind of give those fillers a little bit and make that whole classroom dynamics, very, very engaging and experiential. So what happens is it's not only relaxed, but it also becomes a very collaborative environment. And, it's not a fixed kind of a situation. So when you look at this, the entire climate of the class is what distinguishes from these two methods. Much that many schools who follow the andragogy method think it's pedagogy. I think if we understand what is my classroom dynamics like, we will know which method we are following. So mostly everything is done by the teacher, less by the student, but vice versa. Here it is a collaborative thing. Ma'am, why don't we do this project? Oh my God, this is an issue. Ma'am, how do you think we can actually solve this? And all she does is edges them to say, let's find the answers together. Let's have a discussion. Let's research on this. So when it becomes something that the child becomes more engaged in, even devoid of technology, and having these cross communications between the groups that are formed in the class. It becomes an engaging learning environment, which becomes something that the children are constructing the knowledge. So I think that is the most important thing. And not to be cooped up in classrooms all the time. And if you have a facility, sit under the trees, let them go for a walk, let them go for a hike, and actually engage in these discussions, even, out of classroom, boundaries, and make it so pleasurable for the child that they want to learn. So the main factor here is let them find their own ikigai. What is the purpose of this education? What relevance will this have to me? As I move on, and once they find that relevance of that subject, the topic, and why they actually have to get educated, then I think the onus becomes partly theirs. They become responsible students to actually engage in the whole process of learning. Now, how wonderful is a school like that? Because then the pressure is not on the head of organization or the teachers. We're just creating that conducive environment, igniting the children, and, letting them become those lifelong learners. So I think, this is something that I wanted to visit. And the objectives, in scenario 1 is usually laid out by the teacher. Here it's collaborative. So when a child suggests something and we get on to that activity, then, the excitement is so much more. So I think that is called participatory learning as well. And I find a lot of value in something like that. And, I understand that sometimes, what we are experimenting on, may create a little bit of noise in the corridors or in the classrooms. But I think that is the life of every school, where the learning takes place, and we should get into that. When it comes to assessment also, in the first scenario, it's something very rigid. It's what the teacher wants to get done. But here you can have assessment in multiple ways. It could be through, through role plays. It could be through a quiz that the kids have created, and yet the assessment is going on. So it becomes fun. There's no pressure. There's no fear. Basically, when there is no fear, within the 4 walls, of a classroom, or outdoors for that matter, within the campus, then learning becomes pleasurable. And this fear of failure goes away. It's not the end of the world, because then assessment is only, for improvement of learning. And, that becomes the goal of assessment. Sometimes as educators, we get carried away by what some other school is doing, what parents' expectations are, what society wants, and we want to do it all. And in that rat race of trying to compete and become, one above the other, we're trying to do too many things. Nothing is done perfectly, and everybody's juggling between so many things, and the stress builds up within the campus. Let's take very few things, and decentralize by giving that whole ownership of learning to the child, giving them the freedom, giving the teachers the freedom to handle the class and the content the way they want. And as long as, the children are learning, assessment is not something that we should worry about. We are creating the thinkers and the innovators of tomorrow. Where there's no fear, it's only there that a creative mind can flourish. So I think it is important. It doesn't matter if they've got 75 and not a 95. It really doesn't matter. We know that most of the success stories in the world, believe me, I've talked to many principals also, they were not those 95%, success stories behind them, but they are very successful principals. So let's begin with ourselves. Do marks really matter to that amount that we hype it up in an educational institution? So I think we should start that awareness with parents as well, and talk to them about what we want. These are the intangibles of every organization that set you apart. It becomes your USP. You become a thinker and you do things differently. And this whole thing about you have a thumbs up and this rank and that rank getting published in the papers, I think let's put that down. It's not the end of the world. I was actually reading a research paper on all these toppers and what they actually became much later in life. Many of them have social and emotional issues. They couldn't take failure. Many of them, who are from the top universities, even committed suicide. So what have we achieved by those marks? If you ask me, nothing, because they ended their lives. They couldn't take failure. They didn't want to try again. They gave up fast. So what are the skills that we, imbibe into our children is far more important than those marks and ranks, that everybody is hankering after. We understand that, we are in an era where we're all focusing on skills and 21st century skills, the 4Cs and whatnot. So I believe that the school environment, and this is one thing I always urge principals, as early as we can, introduce children to the art of reading. Let that be a skill that will hold them in good stead for the rest of their lives. What happens is, one, the interest, the imagination, the creativity of a child actually enhances, when they start reading. So, the key thing that every school should focus is reading. And once the child becomes a fluent reader, then obviously the language gets better, the vocabulary is better, the thinking process is exposed to so many authors, and they just find every other subject easy, because otherwise they're struggling to read. So where is the comprehension? And we say the child is no good at this subject. We're not going to the point where it's actually not being able to read and comprehend. So I think focusing on some of these skills, I think will set our children a class apart. The ability to read, to think of different story endings, to think of what would I have done if I was that character, actually gets you into a lot of creative thinking and finding solutions from your own perspective. Appreciation of different styles of writing will come in later. This is something that will help a child forever. And I think it is secondary whether they're reading an ex-textbook of a particular subject, or they're just enhancing some personality skills, or they're just reading, some fiction or non-fiction. It doesn't matter. Because I think when you are a great reader, and if we can create great readers, I think they will stand apart from everybody else. Because most of what we are today is because of what our teachers did in helping us, by introducing us to different genres of books. Whether it's history, you learn about the revolutions, the French Revolution, you learn about the Second World War. And as you read, you get carried away. You have impressions in your own mind about what is right, what is wrong. And I think that's very, very important. So, I think every school should focus on reading. And I look at that as one of the biggest skills, that will hold these kids in good stead. Of course, in a classroom scenario and environment, that we are faced with, we have people with different backgrounds, different belief systems, different religions, different ethnicity, if I may say so. And yet, your belief systems as a child may differ from somebody else's. Emotionally, it may be very hard for you to accept what somebody else is saying or doing. And you are confused, So it is the role of a school and a teacher to listen to the voice of students, give them the choice to express themselves, and also make them understand that it is a social and emotional journey in personality building. When you accept the point of view of somebody else also, you are right, and so can somebody else be. If this understanding, arriving at consensus, is nurtured in the classrooms, I think we'll have few wars that are happening all over the world. The capacity to negotiate, the capacity to find peace, the capacity to arrive at consensus and, find a via media is a skill that will hold them good, not just in their workplace, on their home front, as a community, as a member of a global citizen of the world. So I think small things that are done in schools have bigger impact. 5 lessons less in a year, is not a loss at all to the learning of a child. But not giving them time to explore, experience their own learning, understanding, correlating their thoughts and belief systems, finding relevance and purpose in their education is something that, I think is our responsibility. And we ought to take it up, very, very seriously. So this is what I wanted to say when it comes to school environment. And I move on to, also the parents who are stakeholders. I began with saying that we are the influencers. So what we believe in, what we step back and understand as quality education is something that we infuse into our faculty and it gets permeated into the classrooms. But we must never undermine what is the awareness that we need to bring to our parents. Sometimes we do a lot of good, but when we do not explain what we're doing, there's a lot of confusion. So I always believe taking the parents into confidence and also letting them know that we're doing what we're doing because this is what we believe in. This is the USP of the school. I'm building the intangibles of this great organization so that we are a class apart. And, I say our children, which I also mean to every parent, the kids, your kids who become our kids when they're here, we are all striving for their future. Let's do it with open hearts and not confine it just to examinations, textbooks, curriculum and that, but let's focus on all these other aspects that creates great, balanced human beings. Just exposing or enhancing their intellect alone is inadequate because we have to delve into their social, emotional, physical well-being as well, and also take them to the spiritual quotient because they find a deeper meaning and purpose in life. Many people have asked me this question as to what is the age that one would start actually bothering about social and emotional well-being? You also talk of mindfulness, understanding oneself. What would a little kid know? Believe me, they are untouched. They can do it better than any of us because they are unconditioned minds. In silence, the child absorbs much more. All answers come from within. But we don't quieten our minds. We don't quieten ourselves. We're always busy doing something. And if we're not doing that something, we're thinking of something all the time. So, to stop, reflect, be in the moment and become mindful of everything that we're doing is something that we must inculcate in the children. It begins from as, early as a preschool kid. When there is silence for a minute, if they can try to sit still also, it is a big challenge for them. We are not enforcing it, but when the child decides that this is the time in my circle time, I need to first sit. Let's try not to fidget. And it's not enforced. And then the child is able to express themselves. See, you cannot tell a preschool kid that stop thinking about anything, and just observe your thoughts. That doesn't happen. But we do it in an age-appropriate manner, where we give them time for expression. Sometimes they break down because something has happened at home in the morning. And you're letting them to vent out, talk about it. And you also, not give them the solutions to deal with that emotion, but you also handhold and facilitate how they can overcome it when it happens again, right? And the class is also understanding this. So when we take them, through the journey of emotional and social development, we're connecting the mind and the heart. Empathy, confidence, communication, expression, you name it, and it's happening. And in the silence, as they grow and they sit in silence, many of the turbulences that you have as a child, we live in an era where there are a lot of discord, divorces happening. The child is confused, feels that they are unwanted, that they have done something wrong. It is our responsibility, to be there for them, solid, saying that, we will take care. Also understand, we must make them understand that sometimes adults just need that space. They will be there for you, but, this is the situation. So how are you going to sail through it? If they've got a lot of pent up emotions, let them pen it down. That really helps. So give them some practical, actionable points. When they're writing, sometimes they just break down, throw the pen, and they want to talk about it. Sometimes they don't want to talk about anything, and they just want that silence. But just be there for them. Let's do it their way, because that's the only way. When you walk with a child, he will walk further with you. We have to be there for them, heart and soul. And I think that's what happened. And I've seen many of these kids who are going through, problems at home, coming to school, not being able to deal with it, or because of the abuse that they're having at home, come here and become like bullies. And, we just say stop bullying, but, we have to get into the skin of that kid to see why is he doing what he's doing? Why is he acting like this? And when you start actually talking to the child instead of punishing them, lots, actually comes out, and you empathize with that child and then show them a better way of dealing with the situation than the current way of aggression that they're into. Teaching a child, just not to react, but to act, is very, very important. But all that comes, through the classes that they're with us in small measures. And, it's not enough to say holistic development of a child. We'll actually be developing these kids holistically. So when I talk of emotional and social well-being, I look at that as a major aspect. Also, taking up some case studies in the school, sharing it with facilitators to ensure that, this has worked in this particular case, sharing it with your parent community without mentioning whose child, whose parents, whatever, kind of creates that bond, and I have parents who come to me after 20, 30 years and said, ma'am, this is the solution that, you had given us then. And, you would have forgotten it as a school leader. But, something has changed their lives. So I think the act of being an influencer is also to touch lives. So we work with that concept of doing the best that we can with the best of intentions, and the universe will conspire to make it a reality. And every organization that each of you are, heading will become, that supreme organization, because we're working with our hearts, right? So then I would like to move on to the next point. I think I was talking of is, technological advancements. And I think, embedding technology into this whole process of teaching and learning. I think the discussions that we've had is that now technology is there. We've accepted it. We're using it. But how much is too much is what is, the point that I want to drive. When you talk to pediatricians, small kids, infants, because of both parents working, not having single unit families, not having people to take care of the kids, with a little bit of fuss that the kid makes, the first thing that they do is to keep them quiet, just hand over a gadget, just to quieten them down. But the long-term impact that that's having on the social, emotional well-being of the child is not being understood at that point by a young parent. Right? And the kid is getting hooked onto it. And then, the attention span is going. They get frustrated if they're not being able to have that gadget. And they want to just go on switching things. And life is not like that. It goes with the flow. And you want things to just change like that. I mean, that's an attitude. A teacher's taking a 40-minute session. The kid is bored in 2 minutes, not even 5 minutes. Wants something else. But that doesn't happen in life. So how do we create that stability, for a child, and also use technology in an appropriate way? I think that is very, very critical and crucial for all of us. So when we talk of flipped classrooms, we're all doing it. It's fantastic. When we're talking of, helping teachers become tech savvy, and I think we need to protect our teachers. This is one thing that we need to do. And when I say protect our teachers, it is by making them constant learners. Facilitating that they are also evolving as professionals to keep abreast with whatever is happening. And, technology, fortunately, the younger, a lot of teachers are very much better. The older, a lot of teachers did have their struggles, but they have adapted to it. But reinforce it time and over again. And, I think what we need to do is accept it ourselves as heads of organizations, that this is what it is. One thing is that let's not do something because NEP says, that technology is important and it has to become part and parcel of whatever we're doing in schools. And so people are going crazy. Like, I want to have an AI lab. I want to have robotics here. And I also want to create another STEM lab. And they're trying to figure out what they want to do because most of the stuff that you do goes one after the other. Right? So are we just doing things for those labels for the sake of admissions? for pleasing our management, or do we believe in what we're doing? That is the point that I'm driving. Let's not do things because XYZ school is doing and they've raised the fee. No. We do because we feel that it is going to help my teachers, it's going to help my students. Then we involve or engage in that type of technology for the school. And we should become the first learners and start using it. I'd like to share that, when I go for the CBSE affiliation inspections, small schools, in towns also have put smart boards. So when I walked in for a classroom observation and I asked the teacher to switch on and start using whatever content, she was clueless. So who are we trying to fool? I walked into the second class and the third class. And in the third classroom, one child stood up. The teacher said, it's not working. The child said, no, ma'am, it's working. In the free period, we are all using it. So, somewhere I felt that the technology is there, but head of organization must ensure that everybody is using it in a proper manner. So some type of, verification to see if they're using it or not is also important. And not enforce it because you have to use a smart board, but use it where the teaching will actually be enhanced. And by using something that you've downloaded from YouTube, or you have a learning management system embedded in it, then use it. Where either because of the effect that it has in animation and everything is going to make a child understand better. But something that you can carry to class and show a kid, why would you want to show it on a screen? I fail to understand. So I think use it where it is required and let's leave it where it's not required. I feel that is the best way. Technology really helps us in administration in schools through ERPs. A lot of data which has been compiled there is there, but we have to learn as leaders to analyze that data and take some steps to improve the existing condition of the education system in our school. It's not enough if you know who the fee defaulters are, or they're publishing your circulars, or giving your reports online. It's not just that. If many of the kids in a particular test have not done well in a particular section, review that question paper and see, is it because the lack of teaching, understanding of the children? What is the reason? While the other section has done better. So data can actually help us relook at what is happening in our schools. And unless we use data effectively as leaders, then there's no point in all that data, right? We'll be using it like a tool, because, okay, it's giving us this input, and we're giving this input and that output is coming. That's it. But how is it going to help us evolve our organization is what we should probably be looking at. And, there are many things that, when we talk to teachers, and I'm sure that you too would know that, now with Chat GPT, for example, everybody, was having this big discussion, about how it's going to, kind of change the entire scenario. And it's not a good thing. Children will not do their homework. They will just key in whatever the teachers ask, get those assignments printed, so on and so forth. I understand all this is happening, but I think, the ethics of using technology is very, very important. That is one of the things that we need to influence in our schools. Technology will always be there, but how much to use, how to use, and what we should not do as children or as adults is something that I think is an awareness workshop. So much of cybercrime is happening with children. Many of our children have Facebook accounts, which is illegal because they pump up the age and then they open an account. They fake the age. Many of them have fake profiles on social media. Okay, and then they're getting into depression because somebody has, got so many followers or we don't, and things like that. So I think when we talk about our organization, we should always see how we can also engage them into this, awareness of the do's and don'ts. And, becoming a proper digital citizen is equally important, so that you don't land yourself in a mess. I have a real case scenario where a girl, wanted to commit suicide because she was getting bullied online. And because you engage in talking to strangers, you never know whom you're talking with, so on and so forth. And then you're afraid to tell your teachers, you're afraid to talk to your parents, and you suffer it alone. to a point where you don't know, it's so suffocating that you want to end your life. So I think before the damage is done, if we can take some corrective action and create these awareness programs, I think that is something. We must look into this aspect also and ensure that, it's a safe space. So, I think the safety of our children is so important to and critical to all of us. It's not just the cameras that you fixed in your schools. I always keep telling people, it is just not that camera who's going to catch that teacher or that adult who's doing something wrong or the child who's doing something wrong. But it is the awareness that we need to create as to how we can create this, safe campus. Let everybody be aware, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. They are some non-negotiables, when we are around children. And we should be very firm about these non-negotiables, because, when something goes wrong and we land up in a mess, it is that person, it is us as heads of organizations, it is the reputation of the school. But more than anything, it's the damage done to the child. Nothing is more important, not the reputation of the school, the principal or whatever, but the damage that happens to a child lasts a lifetime. And we will be penalized for that mentally, isn't it? It is our, obligation to ensure that we keep talking about how we can make our campus safe and, protect our children. And, the cameras will do their jobs. But why do we even get that far if we create a group of people who are actually so conscious and wanting to do things morally and ethically right? Teaching children not to copy in an examination, because it is, it is an ethic. It's because it's an ethical thing to do your own thing and not copy. And not because of the fear that, there is a camera and somebody is going to be watching me. All our lives, these small examples of do it because you ought to do it and it's good for you is better than if you don't do it, this will happen. The fear of punishment, and reprimanding them. I think, I think that dynamics that I talk of in schools, this is one distinguishing factor. So when we talk of technology and its impact on education, for students also, some things are really good because it's personalized learning, there's gamification and, things like that. So it actually takes you back to a concept that the child has not understood, revisits that concept till he gets familiar and then takes him to the next concept. Whereas in a classroom scenario, sometimes they may be afraid to ask that question because everybody else has understood. It's only me who's not understood. My teacher may get angry with me. Or she may say, I've already explained it so many times. So that fear sometimes will not help a child. Technology in certain cases, I feel, is also a positive thing where the child can learn as his or own pace, going and revisiting other concepts and taking it forward. Now, coding and other things also that schools are engaging in, I feel, it's a good thing, but it starts off very early. So the analytical mindset can be created by using blocks and, patterns and a whole lot of other things, not necessarily through technology, but by using these blocks and other things. So this actually helps the mindset, the analytical mindset. There's a lot on the net about how you can actually start doing these activities and engage in those activities so that the children become, pros at it. And finally, when they get into coding and other thing, they just know the sequence of things that they ought to do. And not everybody needs to become a coder, by the way. So I think, we should not enforce that everybody has to do it, but those who are interested should get into it and take it up. And, there's also like, you have code.org, you have scratch.mit.edu and certain things like that, which schools have been using, which are very, very efficient and, can be done. When we talk of chat GPT, and creating, what do teachers actually use technology for? Actually, they type their question papers. They probably would make some PowerPoint presentations. And this is the basic thing that they want, or they may want some notes on a particular topic, maybe. All of it can be done through technology now and in a jiffy. What used to take, like we would spend an hour to do a PPT or maybe 2 hours also. Now it will throw that the PPT for you in 5 minutes. which has become so easy for teachers. So I think getting teachers comfortable with the use of technology is imperative, because that will help them save time on a lot of mundane things and you utilize it to spend with children, bond with them, and, take it to the next level also. So, this is what I wanted to talk about. And, probably the last thing is social impact, that children must all be engaged in critical thinking, problem solving, but a long term. They can look into society and say, this is the problem, this is what I want to do. Give them an opportunity. So it's not like many people tell me, oh, I sent my children to the home for the aged, they went and donated this and came back. But, I look at that as a one-off activity, but not a long-term engagement. I believe when children are engaged in a long-term project, they think about the problem, find solutions, execute it, verify whether it has actually worked or not, will actually make them better researchers and executors. After all, we're trying to create, students who will become, trendsetters in the world. And I think these skills that we do is what will set them apart. Empathy too, because it's not all about me and myself. We're grooming children to look at the world around them and become contributors. So on that note, I thank you all for being here and hearing me out so patiently. Now I leave the floor to Gaurav to take it forward.
Wonderful. What energy, Dr. Usha. I think you've spoken for flat 45 minutes.
Thank you.
I mean, it shows that what a passionate educator you are. Lovely. And obviously great spectrum of things, by the way. So I'm sure everybody had made their notes. So given we have only 10 minutes left now, so I won't not really take much time. I will straight dive into Q&A. So as I was sharing in the beginning, educators, that the way we will do it, that if you have any observation or if you have any question for Dr. Usha Reddy, you can give us a virtual show of hand. We'll help you unmute and then you can ask your question or share your views. The only request is that we'll have to keep our focus intact. Please make sure that the question or the observation is with respect to our discussion point, which is the top 10 priorities for educators. I can see Vikrant raising his hand. Vikrant, how are you? Good to see you.
Hi, Gaurav. Absolutely great. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Good. You can ask your question or you can share your observation. Please, over to you.
Yeah. Hello, ma'am Usha. It was lovely hearing you. Absolutely fantastic. And I would really say how the things were flowing from your mind and heart. It was just like a smooth river, so beautifully you described everything. And my question to you is that there are some schools who create that Hitler system in their schools, right? Of course, my schools, I have all congeniality and all the values and everything. My focus is absolutely that. But my son is studying in that school, and starting from the director to principals to the supervisor, they use suspend word 10 times in a day. If you're not wearing uniform, you'll be suspended. If you're doing this, you'll be suspended. They are being shouted and everything. And that is one of the best schools in Amritsar. So why this kind of trend is still on? What do you think that why parents still opt for these kind of schools, those who are having Hitlerian culture? And that happens, those teachers are also groomed in that way. And they further spread this whole thing. Then they forget that children are nothing but flowers and they need to be blossomed like a gardener. So what do you have to say on this?
Yes. So I think, I'm listening to your question. On one side, you are a parent, right? You have chosen the school because you think it is the best school. And on the other hand, you're saying the best school is doing this. So I think, when we make an admission in a school, it is, mandatory that we share our vision, mission, execution, modus operandi with the parent so that we are aligned. Now, obviously, when the school has already become famous, and for them it becomes like an attitude of, if not you, we give you a TC and I'll get somebody else into the school, then that doesn't really work. So it is the choice of every parent, and I take time with every parent and every admission that we made to see that the philosophy of the school and our actionable points, are understood by the parent. Now, see, the only thing that I would suggest here is, as a parent, you have every right, to go and talk about this to the management. Because it may be a couple of teachers who are saying it sometimes, and we say the whole school is like this. So is it a particular teacher or who is it? Then maybe the principal will probably get down to counseling that teacher and not use this, because in a parental forum, when you have your Q&A sessions, it is important that you also let the management know that as parents, we want an environment where there's no fear for the child. And threatening them and trying to instill discipline is not the solution, but I think giving them clarity on what they ought to do and nurturing that habit of being disciplined is what is what ought to be done. So I think as a parent, you can definitely put across your views to the management, and hopefully it's going to work for you.
Okay. Biba Rai, your question?
First of all, apologies. I cannot switch on my camera.
Okay. No problem.
Ma'am, thank you so much for giving such impressive lines. You said that let them create their own ikigai. And we have to create some non-negotiables. This is amazing. Ma'am, I have only 2 questions with you. Just wanted to know. We have working parents. Both the parents are working. And at times, due to weather conditions or due to some other conditions, because we are living in Varanasi, this is PM's constituency. A lot of VIP movements. So we have to go online. And there, wherever the parents are working in lower classes, there's a lot of mix and match. Some parents are very happy, but some parents, they have a lot of hue and cry. So just wanted to know from you, what should be done in those situations? What should be the duration of the class?
Yes. So I think, when the pandemic struck and all of us went online, CBSE also spelled out the age group and the time duration. So pre-primary, it was half an hour. Then for the other classes, it was 1.5 hours, 2 hours, so on and so forth. The stipulation of time duration was given. On the other hand, as organizations, a problem that we faced is that you're only taking for such a short duration, and we're paying the fee for a full day school type of a thing. So we had to face both of that. But what I would like to say is that if I were to go online as a school again, we will follow the same rules. There is something called a 20-20-20 principle. So, every 20 minutes, there has to be a break, I had instructed my teachers, because it is not easy for a child, even in middle school, to focus for too long. And give them a 20-second break, give them an activity that they can do, and then come back related to the topic. And then, you can start your online again. So this takes the stress of the eyes. And also, I think, there is some activity happening. So they do it physically and then get back. So that keeps the classroom also kind of engaged. As it is, they were isolated at that point of time, no friends, so on and so forth. So mingling with people, breakout classrooms, even online, kind of help them bond with people. Small activities, like for example, in a pre-primary, one teacher told me, what activity can I give a little kid? Like what you do in school, right? If you're teaching the color red, you can just say, go and find something red from your mummy's cupboard and then bring it back and show it to me. If the teacher says that, the child is breaking off from in front of the screen, doing whatever they're learning, getting it back, and also showing it to the friends and to the teacher and gaining that appreciation. So this is, something that will be there for the little ones. For the seniors also, give them an activity to do, solve, and then get back online. That was helping us. See, I understand that, if there is, for some reason in Varanasi, you have to go online quite often. I think the best thing would be to, not get too worried about it. Because whatever or how much ever the child can do in the absence of a parent paying attention to an online class, let them do. Even, after that, if it's just for a day or two, nothing to worry. They will get back to looking into the textbooks, or when they go to class, I'm sure it will get reinforced.
Okay. I hope your question got answered, in fact, Biba Rai, right? I think Sangeeta ji, have a question now, unmuting you. I think one book which every educator should definitely read is How to Manage Chaos, because I think schools, if you cannot manage chaos, you cannot be a good educator. That's my view. I mean, on a very lighter note, but I definitely mean, because you're dealing with 30 different kind of people every day basis. It's like managing chaos, if I may say. Anyway, Sangeeta ji, over to you, your question.
Good evening, ma'am and Gaurav. This is an interesting conversation. During your talk, ma'am, you mentioned briefly about spirituality. So I wanted to understand a little more about that and how we do it in the school.
Sure. So like I was saying, the Japanese, for example, begin as early as preschool, and that is something we learned and started off thereafter. So, where the child actually sits and they know they have to wait for their turn. All of this is actually directing them towards physical control first, and then it goes to the mind. So we don't touch on the mind for the lower ones. We're just giving them an emotional outlet. When it comes to the the primary classes, we go to the next stage of, actually expressing or giving them a positive thought infusion, that whatever you think, you can achieve it. So, that, never stop when there is a small setback or a failure. Failures are only stepping stone to success. So what you're doing is you're taking something positive and reinforcing it with them. Whatever you put your mind onto, you can achieve it. So things like that, small, simple things that, begin small and the bigger task will be done. So discipline, why it actually matters. So when you start putting this, see, for them, whatever the teacher says is the ultimate thing. So they start focusing on those things. That becomes a personality trait for them. And when you come on to the other classes, I mean, senior classes, that's when, along with what we're doing, we just say, remain silent. Try to connect to your inner core. So, if the thoughts come, just observe it. Don't try to stop the thoughts. Because they're much older. And, you can just tell them that just observe it. To make it easier, you can also ask them to focus on their breath. Initially, when we started all this, I thought there'll be a lot of flack from students, actually, and I thought they will not like it. But it was the kids who came and said, we felt very nice. We didn't even call it a meditation time. We called it positive thought infusion time. And they actually came back and said that lots of things, and we usually talk of something positive and then lead them on to some silent time, reflection time, as we call it. And when you reflect on things that are done for middle school kids and all, then you find solutions at what you should do the next time, what ought to be done, or you discuss it with the faculty. So you take it step by step. So in voluntary, what's happening is you're understanding yourself, social emotional connect is happening. You're becoming aware of your anger, your hatred, your jealousy, your fears. That is very important. Know thyself, they say. Becoming aware of all these traits and then learning to control them, I think, is the solution. And, I think later on offline, we can always connect, and I can even give you a structured program that, schools can follow.
Wonderful. I think she wanted to say thank you as well, I believe, because the system automatically goes back to on you are not able to unmute yourself, right? But I have.
Thank you again. Ma'am, I would like to connect with you on this particular thing because this is area of interest.
Anytime, anytime.
All right. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much.
So completely out of time. I promised we will try to wind this up at sharp 6. Before we actually close, I would like to quickly make a mention of 2 leaders who have actually filled in these. I will in fact share it with everybody. So this is how we capture these details. If you can see it on my screen, we are getting your responses, which is we are getting these top 10 priorities from everybody. I think I don't know if she's around, but Poonam Rathod made a very comprehensive list. She's from Central Public School. She's the principal of the school. I think she's from Udaipur. Very exhaustive list. I had In fact, I'll just name 3 of them because while there were so many of them, I'm reading, and every session when we will take your name or mention of your points, which are very comprehensive. I also had Mrs. Gunjan Sahni's, which I felt was fairly exhaustive, list of these points, which is from Soptis Public School. This is Bareilly. And one more, which I was reading and I thought finds a mention, was, I think, Roja Paul. I think Roja, I believe she is here, or if she's around. Yeah, this one is give every child a voice, to train the team to be able to match the standards, to motivate. These were, as I said, I think they were very, very comprehensive points, which I think were stood out points for us, which we obviously will keep reading more as we go along, which is in the next subsequent sessions. But for now, I think Roja is raising hand as well. You want to say something, Roja?
I don't have to say much because there is somebody over there who's already said everything that I wanted to say. Usha ma'am. Okay.
Wonderful.
So
Wonderful.
who's been my mentor and continues to be. So I think that's what resonates. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Fabulous, fabulous. So on that note, firstly, a huge thank you to Dr. Usha Reddy. Even after 60 minutes of very energetic conversation, you have a beaming smile on your face. Lovely, good to see you. And obviously, I'm sure this is something which we all can learn, that see, if you do it, anything under with this kind of passion and motivation, you will always have a very pleasant demeanor, if I may say, even after a 1 hour of session. So thank you very much for your very valuable time. I think you covered everything which is very exhaustive. And even when we were discussing this, I could figure out that this is a very exhaustive conversation which we will have with you. And I believe everybody through their responses in the chat have already confirmed they have really, really liked it. So thank you very much. Obviously, all of you who have joined us here, we will keep it 60 minutes because I personally feel too much of technology, which is you should not extend from 60 minutes and onward, right? So we obviously had a great time, and please, if you have any other feedback for us, do share it with us. You can share it with me on my personal WhatsApp as well. So how can we make this conversation far more meaningful for you whenever we bring that to you next time, for that matter, right? So thank you, and once again, everybody who had joined us, see you very, very soon. And thank you, Dr. Usha Reddy, once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gaurav, and to all the participants. I think I enjoyed the session, and I just hope that at least there are 1 or 2 takeaways for
most definitely, more than 1 or 2 takeaways, I will tell you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye-bye. Yes.